People are strange, and sometimes they do strange things. Here's what I mean. Right now, the cost of living is through the roof in Australia. That is, if you're lucky enough to have a roof, because mortgage rates have never been this high for years. Also, the exchange rate between the Australian dollar and the American dollar is seriously in the toilet. And this week in Melbourne, petrol was $2.30 a litre. So how can anyone explain to me the fact that we're falling over ourselves as a race to buy big American-made petrol-powered pickups? It just doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is that Ford's looked at what we're doing, looked at our buying behaviour and figured, hey, I wouldn't mind a slice of that. So they've released this car, the Ford F-150. Yes, it's American, yes, it's petrol-powered, and yes, it's north of $100,000 in its most basic form. So, is it another folly? Or is there a place in the world for a car like this? The F-150 is pretty well specified, especially if you choose the more expensive Lariat model, which gets a bigger info screen, blingy wheels, ventilated front seats, auto wipers, keyless start and a big sunroof. It also gets a 12-volt socket in the tray. Why doesn't the XLT get this too? Beats us. But even the base model XLT gets 20-inch alloy wheels, heated front seats, adjustable pedals, and the full suite of towing aids, including the optional in some markets, Tomax package, which includes a stronger chassis. Prices start at $106,950 for the XLT in short wheelbase form, and $995 more for the long wheelbase version. The price gap is the same for the Lariat, with the shorty, if you can call anything 6 metres long short, landing at $139,950, and the long tub model $140,945. The choice of a long or short wheelbase is interesting in this sector, but the design story around the F-150 is all about the conversion from left to right-hand drive. The trucks are imported complete from Ford's factory in Michigan before they're pulled apart at RMA's facility in Melbourne's outer north. So essentially, they're built twice, once in the US and the second time here. Along the way, a lot is changed, including some structural pieces, the dashboard, and almost the entire wiring loom. But the end result? Ford Australia reckons its version of the F-Truck trumps the American one in some critical areas like steering response and NVH. The F-150 is what the American market calls a full-size pickup, and compared with the dual cabs we're used to, you can actually see where that extra size is, particularly from the back seat. Like most American cars too, there's tons of convenience. There's air vents, there's cup holders, more cup holders than I can count, charge points, there's storage space under the seat, very clever. But the big difference for me, compared with something like the Ford Ranger, is the quality of the backseat accommodation. There's a proper cushion, it's actually comfy. The backrest is at a much nicer angle. And if, like a lot of Australian families, you've now got a couple of teenage kids who look like they could become professional basketballers, a car this size, an interior this plush, is going to make a big difference to everybody's happiness on a long trip. Now, one of the big things about vehicles like this has always been the quality of the interior fittings. And over the years, if you know anything about F-150s or Ford F-Trucks in general, you'll know that the interiors were appalling. The plastics were rubbish, the fit and finish was terrible, they were rattly, they were clattery, they'd fall apart, they didn't like UV radiation, they were just appalling. This car is so much better, it's not funny. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong, you can still feel that this car is built down to a price. In terms of its plastics and its fit, the fit and finish isn't perfect, but it's absolutely acceptable for this type of truck. The other thing that's really interesting is the way that the right-hand drive conversion's been done. It's all engineered in Australia and they've done a really good job. Their goal was to make sure that the vehicle was as good as the left-hand drive version in terms of NVH and quality, if not better. And in fact, in some areas, they've actually trumped the left-hand drive car. The other thing that's going to stop a lot of people buying a vehicle like this is that it does take up so much real estate. They're not really compatible with car parks at supermarkets. They're not really compatible with underground car parks. They're not even that compatible with a lot of domestic driveways. One of the F-150's big marketing points, and it's something that most of the others don't offer, is a choice of tray length. Now, believe it or not, this is the short wheelbase. It's still almost big enough to sleep in. It's got a spray-on liner and really clever things like a tailgate with a built-in cup holder, a little workbench, some storage for your pens and knickknacks, and even a ruler built into it in centimetres And because it's American, good old-fashioned inches. Brilliant. Like its American-made pickup competitors, under the bonnet of the F-150, you won't find a diesel engine. But unlike its competitors from the US, you won't find a petrol V8 either. In this case, you get a V6 petrol, 3.5 litres, and it makes plenty of performance. Don't be fooled by the fact that it's only 6 cylinders. The twin turbos mean it makes 298 kilowatts of power and 678 newton meters of torque, and that is plenty, let me tell you. The only thing is, being a physically small engine in this huge engine bay, it looks like it's a bit lost in there, but let's see what it's like on the road. A lot of people are going to approach their first drive of the F-150 with dread in their hearts because it is a big vehicle. It looks huge, and that's because it is. But it's one of those cars that when you drive it, it doesn't actually feel as big as its exterior dimensions would suggest. It does have a lot of footprint. You've got to be careful when you're maneuvering and parking. But once you're up and rolling, it's got that knack of kind of shrinking around you. Not to any great extent, don't get me wrong. It's never going to feel like a sports car. But it doesn't feel as humongous as you might think. In fact, it feels like a slightly bigger Ford Ranger to drive, and that's actually a big compliment. And I reckon part of that is the fact that with the move from left-hand drive to right-hand drive, the Australian engineers have come up with a steering system that's based heavily on the powered rack and pinion system of the Ranger. And you can feel it. There's definitely some Ranger DNA in this thing, which is, you know, as I say, a huge plus, because these cars can be primitive and they're not all as sophisticated as this. This one's also quite refined. The ride is very good, despite the heavy duty suspension and the fact that it can handle 4.5 tons on the tow bar. The ride over really rugged roads at decent speed is actually pretty amazing. It's one of the better ones in that respect. Around town, the ride's pretty supple. You can still feel that there's a fair bit of unsprung weight going on, but it's not too bad, and it doesn't really intrude into the driving experience. You'll soon get used to the way this car feels, which again is a fair compliment because there is a lot going on. The engine is pretty incredible. I guess the big question is whether Ford can convince people who buy this sort of truck that a V6 turbo is as good as a V8 petrol. It's one of those tough ones because this car doesn't really have the soundtrack of the V8, but it's certainly got the performance. The kilowatts are within cooey of its competition, and its torque is pretty darn good. It's better than some of the V8s because of those turbochargers. And the 10-speed automatic works really well too. I'm in the XLT, which has part-time four-wheel drive, but the Lariat has full-time four-wheel drive, which means it can be used in four-wheel drive on dry bitumen. And when you're towing, particularly on a damp road or even a dry road, and if you're towing a big load, that's going to be a major, major bonus. So I think the Lariat, if you're going to tow big loads, is probably the one to go for. But I do like the XLT. I think the screen's a bit small. I'd prefer the big screen from the Lariat. The upholstery in this car, there's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. And I really love the column gear shift, which the Lariat misses out on. It's got a T-bar in the center console. I think for a vehicle like this column shift is great. It's functional. It's not sexy, but hey, it's a pickup. That's okay. For anybody who thinks that 10 gears is too many in a transmission, come and drive this because it might just change your mind. There is a gear for every occasion. And wow, even though it skips a few now and then, it's so intelligent in the way it does it and so smooth and sophisticated, it's worth the admission. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, fuel economy. It's a big one in this day and age, let me tell you. You are going to use around 12 litres, 11 litres per 100 on the highway in this car. Add 50% to that if you're towing anything. Add double it if you're towing anything heavy, I guess. It's comparable with the V8 petrol competition, but it's not as good as a diesel would be. But here's the point. This type of truck in America just doesn't run on diesel. But by and large, over there, if a vehicle has less than 18 wheels, it runs on petrol. It's part of the Second Amendment. Right after the bit about keeping and arming bears is the right to use petrol engines in pickup trucks. I will say it does wonders for a refinement. You know, this car is quite a lovely car to just idle along in 10th gear, and it does carry 10th gear at quite low speeds. The F-150 is one with a lot in safety terms. You get autonomous emergency braking, brake assist, lane keeping assist, a rear camera, trailer sway control, tyre pressure monitoring, and 6 airbags, including side curtain airbags for all outboard passengers. The Lariat ups the ante with adaptive cruise control, steering assist, road sign recognition, and a 360-degree camera view. You can check out the full story in the written review at carsguide.com.au. Ford Australia is backing this truck, including its conversion in Australia, by covering the F-150 with the standard Ford factory 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty. Service intervals are not strictly tied to kilometres or time because the vehicle analyses how it's been used and alerts the driver when a service is due. So, where does that leave us with the F-150? What do we think of it, generally? Well, a lot of people approach a car like this as a fashion accessory. To my mind, they're barking up the wrong tree. The only reason I'd buy one of these is if I needed its unique skill set. If I need to tow an awfully big digger or caravan or boat, or I need to cart a lot of stuff in the tray, then maybe this is the vehicle I need. If I'm not doing those things, I'm going to buy a Ranger and be just as happy and have money in my pocket, because these things aren't cheap. So that's the bottom line. If you need it, buy it, because it is, of all these big American pickups, it's up there with the best of them. So you're not dudding yourself in that sense. Just make sure you're buying it for the right reasons.